All right, it is just after 7, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome you to our October school board meeting. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Earlier this evening, we conducted interviews for our board vacancy. While we only were able to interview 5 candidates for this position, we had 10 people apply for this vacancy. As someone currently sitting on this school board, I want to thank all 10 people for applying to serve the school district in this capacity. Our community is incredibly lucky to have this level of support. We will be voting on this position a little later on, but we have a very full meeting ahead of us, so we will go ahead and get started by reviewing this consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I second.
Awesome. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. All right. Next up is our spotlight on. Quite frankly, it's something that we always really look forward to. And I think today, Mr. Mitchell is going to be leading us in both of those spotlights on. We will let you get started.
All right. Chair Hecker, Superintendent Lyon, School Board. Sorry. Hawkins. Sorry. I apologize. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm excited to present some accomplishments of some of our students in 2 different areas. Early each year, the College Board awards academic honors to underrepresented students who receive scores in the top 10% of the PSAT, NMSQT, or PSAT 10 exams, or a score of 3 or higher on 2 or more distinct AP exams. These National Recognition Program academic honors can be included on college and scholarship applications and connect students with universities across the country, helping them meaningfully stand out during the admissions process. Sherwood High School is proud to announce that 4 SHS students have been identified as awardees within the College Board National Recognition Program. They are Ella Thompson, Jacob Goldine, Jet Nguyen, and Megan Soto. Let's give them a round of applause. All right. And with me here tonight, Sherwood High School is proud to announce that SHS senior Kathleen Maida has been named as a National Merit semifinalist. Approximately 16,000 students nationwide were selected and will have the opportunity to continue in the competition for 7,500 National Merit scholarships worth $30 million that will be awarded next spring. Semifinalists must fulfill several requirements to advance to the finalist level of competition. About 95% of the semifinalists are expected to attain finalist standings, and about half of the finalists will win a National Merit Scholarship. So please join me again in giving a round of applause to Kathleen Maida. Very proud of you. Thank you all again.
That's very exciting. Congratulations and thank you, all of you students, all 5 of you, for representing our district so well. I'm sure you guys have a very bright future ahead of you, and we're excited to hear what you guys do. So congratulations. Okay, we will move right along to board reports. We will start with our superintendent, Dr. Lyon.
Thank you, Chair Hawkins.
Thank you.
The only thing I'm going to report on tonight, among many things, the one that was just so great to see were the elementary fun runs and the great job that the parents of the parent advisory committees did in just creating this incredible positive energy and vibe. And the weather cooperated and they raised a lot of money and the kids were just having a great time. And it was just really a joy to see. So kudos to the elementary school PACs and the teachers and staff and the administrators who really made that thing happen. It was pretty special and fun to be a part of.
All right, Ms. Paisley, do you have a report for us this evening?
Thank you, Chair Hawkins. I don't really have much to say today, but on October 22nd from 9 to 12 is when we have our leadership summit. So if any of you guys have any kids that want to join us and learn more about what it means to be a leader, you guys can join us at the high school on October 22nd. And recently we've just been working on like the tailgate, and then we have a mixer coming up, and that's pretty much it.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here tonight and informing us of that. That's very cool. All right, we will go down the line with our board reports. Director Lee, do you have anything to report this evening?
Not much. We've been getting a lot of emails regarding the standards-based grading, and I think there's a lot of questions and about that from our community, and they've brought up some information that I wasn't aware of and hadn't thought of. So I think it'd be good to hear that out and redress that.
All right, Director Mangaro.
Well, I guess this is it. My last board report. I didn't want to waste it. So I wrote some things down that are near and dear to my heart, and I'll just start in. I'm lucky. I'm lucky to have had the opportunity to serve the parents, students, and employees of this district. It's been one heck of a ride and one of the greatest single honors of my life. I decided to run for this seat because first and foremost, I was curious. My curiosity began back in the summer of 2020 as to why a school district would link a politically motivated and racially biased resource in their communications. To be fair, they retracted the link and apologized. However, I didn't believe they were sorry back then, and I don't believe they're sorry now. I believe they were sorry that they got caught. I was curious why a high school principal would say that the education system is rooted in oppression and white supremacy. I was curious why a sitting superintendent would double down and write a communication defending that principle after the community voiced their concern over the aforementioned statement. I was curious why the kids were not allowed to go to school to be with their friends. I was curious why children were being forced to wear masks when they returned to school. I learned that many of the questions I was asking were a direct result of state leadership, starting with Governor Kate Brown down to the unelected bureaucrats of the Oregon Department of Education and the Oregon Health Authority, all the way down to school boards and the superintendents who enabled them and the teachers unions who allegedly colluded with them. I've learned that the Oregon Department of Education would not allow me to accomplish what I wanted, which is put 100% focus on education. Instead, they are intent on filling our schools and kids' heads with distractions in the form of social justice, activism, sexuality, and tenets of CRT. They tell us to teach our kids, they tell us what to teach our kids, whether you agree with them or you do not. The Oregon Department of Education has to go, or at the very least be completely overhauled. Our focus should be on reading, writing, math, art, athletics, and science. With all the learning lost due to the lockdowns imposed by the OHA and Kate Brown, Oregon kids have paid the price and are underperforming. We simply do not have the time for social justice, activism, sexuality, or CRT. Anything other than reading, writing, math, art, athletics, and science, in my opinion, is a distraction. Distractions have no place in education and should be kept to a minimum. We should be doing everything in our power to teach our kids the skills they need to be productive adults. I'm lucky I grew up in a time when I could go to school and learn without all of the distractions kids are subject to these days. I know it would have negatively impacted my learning. I'm lucky I didn't have to look at Black Lives Matter propaganda all over my school, being constantly reminded that I was different. Growing up, I attended schools that were mostly white. I attended Hazelbrook over here in Tualatin and graduated from Tualatin High School in '99. I was one of two, maybe three other brown kids in the school at that time, and I was always treated very well. It was no issue. It's where I met my wife, Robbie, and some of my best friends with whom I still keep in touch. I made friends, played sports, and went about my education. I don't remember anyone caring that I was not white. I was just Duncan. I would have hated it if my teachers had constantly pointed out to others that I was different, or that I had to have my head on a swivel for racism every time I left my house. I remember there was one time in my class, we were learning about the horrors of slavery. We ended up watching the miniseries Roots. After we watched the miniseries, a girl came up to me afterward and apologized. Although I know this was not her intention, I was infuriated. The fact that anyone would view me as a victim or that I somehow hold her responsible for the things that never happened to me and for the things that happened maybe 150 years ago, it infuriated me. I know that wasn't her intention, but that was my reaction based on my upbringing. I'm lucky my parents didn't raise me to see myself as a victim or oppressed. My father was an African immigrant. He was never indoctrinated to think he was at a disadvantage in life because of the color of skin, because he came from a place where most everyone looked like him. He grew up in poverty. I'm still haunted by the story he told me, how he would sometimes become so hungry he would eat dirt, literal dirt. He came here with nothing. A Black African immigrant came here with nothing to the United States back in the late 70s. Despite this, he scraped his way here. He raised a family, finished his college degree, and long story short, he now spends most of his days driving to a golf course in his brand new Mercedes-Benz. He accomplished so much in this country despite systemic racism. And when I say systemic racism, I say systemic racism. Despite poverty, despite his skin color, despite his thick African accent, most people can't even understand a word that's coming out of his mouth. He broke through all of that. He's excelled at everything. He's a wonderful man. He's been an excellent role model for me, and I'm proud of him. I was lucky I had a mother who, when skin color came up in our home, she would tell me how beautiful my skin was and how much she wished she had it. She was white. She'd say things like how I had natural sunblock, so I wouldn't have to use as much sunscreen as others. I would joke with her. We took skin color lightly in our house. I would say I'd say, Mom, if Dad is Black and you're white, shouldn't I be gray? She made me feel proud of who I was and made me feel like I was at an advantage because of it. I never focused on it, and I didn't realize how free it made me. I wish more people of color were raised this way. Sadly, most are taught that there's this shadowy, nameless, faceless force out there to get them and keep them from succeeding. Or worse, they'll be killed at a traffic stop. It's not true. My dad has proved to me that this isn't true. The fact that I'm sitting here in this seat is proof that this isn't true. I was able to defeat a 2-term incumbent and sitting board chairman. I'll add that he just so happened to be the current OHA director and former DCBS director. If I had been taught what most children of color are taught, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I know racism exists, but know that I believe it has had no meaningful effect on my life. God help the people who continue to psychologically damage people that look like me. There's 3 groups that in this country that pop out to me. I did some research. That they have the highest median income in this country. Highly educated. It's Indian Americans, Asian Americans, and Jewish Americans. I did some more research, and I found a common theme with these groups that are so successful in this country. They put an emphasis on family and education. It's not about skin color. It's not about anything else. It's about family and education, and we need to focus on promoting that to some of these marginalized and disadvantaged communities. Family and education. I dropped my daughter off at her 1st grade class and noticed, or I should say, I didn't drop her off at class. I was going there to do the meet and greet. I forget what it's called. It's when you go meet the teacher and drop off some supplies and meet get them settled into their class before school starts. And there was a Black Lives Matter poster in the classroom, and my daughter pointed it out immediately because we've had these conversations, and I've told them that Black Lives Matter, we do not stand for what they stand for. On the surface, you hear Black Lives Matter and it's sounds great. We can all get on board with that, right? But the reality is they've since removed this, but one of their tenants back on their website a while back was that they wanted to disrupt the nuclear family. They had that on their website. They've since removed it because it was kept getting so much attention. And that just, when I remembered that while I was researching these groups that are so successful, the ones that are focusing on family and education, it really bothered me. I believe they are also based on a false premise that, you know, African Americans are being mowed down by police, which just isn't true. There are more unarmed white people that are killed every year than Black people. And that's the truth. If you want to look it up, you can look it up. It's based on a lie. I think it's politically motivated, and I don't like seeing that in my daughter's classroom. I don't want my daughter to be made to feel like she's a victim. To the students of color, you are not a victim. Your skin does not define you. Your character defines you. You can accomplish anything you want here in America. See my dad. I'll give you his phone number. If you're having issues, you can call him. He'll tell you what to do. To all other students, you are not responsible for anyone but yourself. You're especially not responsible for the actions of people who lived 150 years ago, or any other of the horrific acts of racism by others. We are one race, the human race. We are all equal in God's eyes. I hope this district can remove all racially based clubs and propaganda from the schools. I hope teachers will teach that skin color does not matter. It's what's in your head and heart that matters. I believe Martin Luther King Jr. said that by the content of their character, they be judged. I really want to thank all of the teachers that are already teaching this. You are helping these students more than you could ever know. I want to thank all of the district staff, parents, and students. I will forever cherish this experience. I wish the district nothing but love and continued success. And I believe we have all the right people in place to ensure that this continues to happen. Thank you for all that you've given me. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to take a moment to note that, you know, as I've served on this board for a long time, I've gotten to know board members who, you know, who bring passion to this work. And Duncan, you've really been among those. We have not always agreed or seen things from the same perspective, but I appreciate that you've brought passion, your personal perspective to this work, and your courageousness for being willing to share your story this evening was appreciated. And I wish you and your family all the best as you embark on this new journey. I think it takes courage to be willing to put your name on a ballot, courage to be up here and be willing to make votes, some of which are popular and some of which are not. And so I appreciated your willingness to serve and be part of this process over the last year and a half, and wish you all the best in the future. And just thank you for your service. And I just want to also say, just over the last few weeks, lots of exciting things happening in the district, and it's just so great to see students hear them on Saturday mornings playing in the fields, and was at a band competition all last week. And who would have guessed that we would have had issues because it was 90 degrees in October. But turns out that causes different kinds of problems. So it was a fun day and a great event, and just when we were building the high school, we never imagined, because we were adding so much parking, that we'd ever have a parking problem again. But it is a blessing that we have parking problems, because we've got too many spectators for both volleyball and band and soccer and softball and all of the things there at the high school. So looking forward to Sherwood West getting built so people can park in neighborhoods nearby.
We have a long meeting tonight, so I wasn't actually gonna do one of my board reports, except till now. Duncan, thank you so much for the opportunity to serve with you and to work with you. I have so much respect for you and for your family. Thank you to Robbie for supporting you throughout this. Thank you for such a powerful message tonight. Hearing all of that from your perspective, and it just was really moving. Thanks for making me cry up here in front of everybody. But I really admire you and I really respect you. And I'm just really proud to know you and call you a friend. So thank you. And thank you for sharing what you did. That also took a lot of courage, and you're a great human. Good luck to you.
All right. Director Nyangaro, I am pleased that we got to serve together as well. You were a complete stranger to me when this whole process got started, and it has been a pleasure to get to know you and understand more about you. And I mean, I feel like I was just kind of cracking the Duncan code and understanding our communications. So I'm actually disappointed that we don't have more opportunity to serve together in that way. But I definitely wish you and your family absolute success. I know that you are happy to be in a new position and a new adventure, and I hope that that move is everything that you guys want it to be. Absolutely. On a lighter note, and a kind of along the same lines as Director Adamson, I was so excited to be a part of fun runs and see all the kids, although my own child refused to participate. It was still really fun too. She told everyone, Bradley, she ran 0 laps, and she meant it. But it was really fun to be there to see all the kids. And it's incredible to know that parents are coming out and supporting the schools again in that same way. I know that we're running really light still with volunteers. It's hard to get everybody back in the action and background checked and all the things that we need, but it's an amazing problem to be having. So if you're a parent who's looking to volunteer, I know that the middle school is desperately in need of volunteers for the Freaky Friday carnival dance whole situation. So get online if you have any interest in helping out and get involved. It's exciting. It's fun to see the parking lots really full again. I don't like the parking problem, but it's cool to see that there are so many people there. So I would encourage you guys to get out and be a part of things as much as possible now that we're able to do that again. We will now move on to hearing public comment. I believe we have 2 tonight that are pertaining to the actual agenda items. So we will listen to those first. The other ones we will hear later on this evening after we come to the end of our agenda. If you've signed up to give public comment, I will call your name and you may take the podium. As a reminder, public comment time is just a time for us to hear from you. We will not be responding at this time. Many of us might be taking notes though, so that we can have some conversation about it and get back to you in the future with some information if we have any to share with you. So I will welcome Clayton Broderick to the podium to share with us. Can you reach the podium? Do we need to do some? We need some adjustments. Yeah, stand off to the side. There you go, bud.
My name is Clayton, and I'm in 4th grade. For a long time, I didn't really like reading. Too many books were boring. I do not like it when I have to read about someone who is sad all the time. community circle is really boring too. We talk about our feelings too much. It doesn't help at all. My uncle challenged me to read Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. Finally, a good book. This book doesn't talk all about feelings. It's just a good adventure, and I can make a good friends and be kind. Kind. Thank you for helping the teachers to create more adventures and less sadness.
That takes a lot of courage to get up there and share with us. So I really appreciate you being here tonight, bud. Thanks for reading to us. Okay, we have one online comment, I believe, as well. So I will wait for that to get queued up.
Okay, from Lucas Mikado in Sherwood. Dear Dr. Lyon and Sherwood School Board, I am presenting this today as a concerned student. My name is Lucas Machado, and I'm a senior at the high school with a 3.98 GPA. I am deeply concerned with the pilot project currently underway in our high school, testing the standards-based grading system. To preface, I am now in my second year of testing this system. Last year, in my 11th grade language arts, I found the system to be incredibly confusing, but I managed to get a 4 or equivalent to an A. This year, however, it seems to have gotten worse. We are piloting the system in my physics class, which ranges from sophomores to seniors. Currently, I have the equivalent to an 81.3%, which is concerning as I usually do quite well in science classes. With this system, they break down the scoring into 3 to 5 chunks, and you are assessed a few times a trimester on each section. After our first assessment, the teacher said that our scores were way lower than he had hoped, and he thinks his rubric was partly to blame. The problem I have with this is we as students are currently being used as beta testers or guinea pigs for lack of a better term. This is something that we didn't sign up for, have any advanced knowledge of, and could seriously affect our futures. As you are aware, while a GPA is not the most important aspect of judging a person's level of ability, it is still widely used in the college application process, especially when determining things like scholarships. For example, at the college I will be attending next fall, Grand Canyon University, the difference in scholarship between a 4.0 and a 3.9 plus GPA is $2,000 per year. If you have a 3.7 to 3.89 GPA, it drops another $1,000 per year. As you can tell, little differences in GPA can end up costing a lot of money or could mean the difference between getting accepted and getting rejected from a college. The issue is we didn't sign up to beta test this system. Nowhere when I was signing up for my classes did it indicate which classes would be testing this, and I would have avoided classes that use this system if I had known. The issue that me and my peers are having with this system is that it gives you limited chances to improve your grade, and it requires a lot of little steps to get the score you want. On the first point with this new system, you will often have 2 to 4 opportunities per trimester to be tested on each standard, which can have as much as a 25% impact on your grade. With the old system, we had many opportunities through things like in classwork, homework, and participation to try and balance the impact of our test, 80% test and 20% daily work. Because humans are naturally imperfect beings and sometimes fail at things, the old system was more forgiving if you did poorly on a test or assignment, as it had many different things to balance it out. No assignment was usually worth more than a few percent of your final grade. The rubrics were easier, and that's time.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our public comment section for items pertaining to tonight's agenda. We will move into our information and discussion portion of the agenda and begin with the district financial review. Dr. Lyon will be leading us off in that presentation.
All right, and I will be joined by Gary Bennett at the podium, and Angie Peterman and Claire Hertz, our 2 consultants as well. You can stay put until you're part.
They're like,
All right, before I read my introduction to this, I'd just like to say overall, we have a very, very good school district. And in my short time here, I've come to confirm everything that I suspected about the Sherwood School District. And so the report this evening, although concerning and presents some challenges to us, we will get through it. We will remain strong and we will move forward. So with that said, I'd like to read the introduction this evening, and then I'm going to have our Chief Financial Officer, Gary Bennett, go through a slide deck that illustrates some of the comments that I will make. And then we will hear a report that we received yesterday from two outside consultants on our financial situation, who are both very highly regarded veteran experts in Oregon K-12 school finance. And that is the two people that I mentioned earlier, Claire Hertz and Angie Peterman. So let me introduce what we are talking about this evening. We are presenting to you this evening the current state of the financial position of the school district. The reports will be given by our Chief Financial Officer, Gary Bennett, and two Oregon School District financial consultants. You will hear their reports shortly, and after we listen to both Gary and their reports, will be the time for board questions, and we'll provide answers to the best of our ability. In the first 100 days of my tenure as interim superintendent, we have discovered that the school district budgets, beginning with the 2020-21 school year, were based upon inaccurate calculations of revenue and managed using accounting and reporting practices that were both confusing and not transparent. From 2020 to today, the annual Sherwood District budgets presented to the board included revenue projections that repeatedly overestimated actual revenue received from the state and from other sources. The overestimations of revenue that was actually never received by the district, began in 2020 and taken collectively from that point forward to today has effectively drained district contingency and ending fund balance reserves. In the same time period, as district reserves were being used to cover unfunded expenditures, the school board financial reports that you received monthly were indicating that district reserves were growing and stable. In fact, these reserves were declining at a rate that has accelerated within this year's budget and results in the need to take immediate and substantial corrective action. The inaccurate revenue estimates were carried forward each year beginning in 2020 with a magnifying effect, meaning that inaccurate ending fund balances rolled over from one year to the next without proper reconciliation with actual revenues, making the financial problems of the district grow over time right up to today. A little perspective here. Gary Bennett, our new CFO, and I started on the same day, July 1, 2022, which is about 100 days ago. And everything we report tonight has been evolving and sharpened right up to today. In early August, as Gary transitioned into the role, he detected problems related to our operating budget. The problems involved both fund balances and accounting practices. By late July, first month, he brought his concerns to my attention. In response, I concurred with Gary's recommendation to bring in third-party experts and to give them access to our financial system. Their task was to independently calculate our position and either confirm or correct Gary's concerns regarding the district's finances. And unfortunately, they have confirmed Gary's concerns, and their findings and recommendations will be presented this evening. I want to make an important point here. I have just told you that our overall district budget has been built the last 3 years using revenue amounts that did not match what we actually received from the state, and that the accounting and reporting practices used to guide the school district's finances were confusing and not transparent. Once the annual budget was passed in each of those years, the spending amounts for each campus and each department were allocated by the fiscal department, and administrators moved forward, receiving, managing, and spending their allocations. Over the last 3 years, our campus and department leaders have all managed their allocations both responsibly and competently. Our administrators have done an excellent job being frugal with spending at campuses and within departments. In fact, in this 3-year period, campus administrators and department directors have consistently spent less than their allocations. And thank goodness for that, or our problem would be even greater. And I've tried to figure out a simple way to think about this, because it is interesting when you're talking about revenue over projections. But think about it like this. One of our principals was told that she had $10 to spend at the campus level during the school year. She spent $8. Each month, you, the board, saw that $8 expenditure as actual expenditures compared to projected expenditures. And you thought, as did the public, that you were looking at a $2 surplus, 10 minus 8. Everything looked fine because you didn't have any reports that provided the actual revenue that was being received. Without a revenue report, you would only assume that the principal's $10 allocation was backed by actual revenue. In my scenario, it turns out that there never really was $10, that maybe there was 7 or less. Our principals and directors would not have had any idea that their approved budget allocations that they use to operate their departments and campuses were not supported by actual revenue at the district level. And also another very important point, our budget situation is referring to the general fund, as you will hear in the reports to come, and include nothing related to the 2016 construction bond program. Every single bond dollar approved by the community within the bond program is accounted for properly. Every bond dollar has been spent exactly on its intended purpose. Our bond program was managed by Cornerstone Construction Management, a firm with impeccable credentials and performance over decades in Oregon. I used them when I was the superintendent at Hillsborough, and they did the very same thing. They did an impeccable job with our bond program there. They tracked every dollar, and every bond dollar has been accounted for independently, and these funds have been spent exactly for the intended purpose. After the reports are finished and the board has had an opportunity to ask questions, I will close tonight by discussing what needs to be done moving forward. Our focus will shift to solving the immediate financial problem and then building a long-term plan. We have to make cuts this school year. Gary will identify the size of the cuts we are forced to make this evening. These cuts are going to be very difficult to make because we are already underway. We're already in a budget, spending. We've had a great start to the school year, and we will do everything we possibly can to keep that forward momentum going in a positive way. Our focus will include instituting recommendations to improve our fiscal operations. You'll hear about that this evening, to ensure this never happens again. We will be transparent with parents, community, and staff. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., we begin staff meetings that are scheduled across the district. And we have planned 2 upcoming superintendent listening sessions for the community with a special focus on this topic. After this evening, we, the administrative staff, will turn our attention to correcting the problem we have with everything that we've got. With that said, I'd like to turn it over to Gary Bennett, who will begin the presentation that he has. Gary.
Thank you, Superintendent Lyon, Chair Hawkins, Board of Directors. This is certainly not the first report I wanted to make in my new role as CFO, but I want to take you through a few different things tonight. And we'll really look at the revenue as it was reported and how that compared to our actual district financials. We'll take a good look at financial reporting. Superintendent Lyon referred to that a little bit. We'll take a look at enrollment and some other factors, and we'll get into short and long-term solutions. So that's kind of what we'll try to cover, not what we'll try to cover, what we will cover. Dr. Lyon already said a few of these things, but I just want to make this clear. The general fund is our main fund for general operations. That's where our state school fund revenue comes into and other revenues that are unrestricted. And that's the one we're challenged with tonight. We do get a lot of other funding from grants, which are becoming an increasingly large share. If you think about the integrated guidance work we presented you with, that's guidance for how we go about obtaining a lot of these different grants. But our grant funds are on or under budget across the board. In fact, they are helping us out in this problem as we've been able to shift more and more resources to those grants. And our debt service and bond funds are in good standing. We have reserves set aside for curriculum and technology. Those are intact and on budget. We told the community we would set aside funds for 10 years worth of curriculum and technology, and we're on pace to maintain that. Additionally, we have a couple $1 million set aside for projects as deferred maintenance, things that are in line with the original bond question, which those funds have to be spent on. It is important to note that by statute, by law, bond funds cannot be spent on general operations. They have to be spent on capital goods or things specified in the bond question. So the fact that we have several $1 million in bond funds helps us out because we have money for deferred maintenance and other things, but it cannot help us with our operating deficit we face today. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was what was reported to the budget committee and the board and the staff. And they were inaccurate revenues reported. And these revenues were used to make some important decisions like building a budget, bargaining with our licensed and classified associations, setting staffing ratios, and ultimately you, the board, approving a budget. This is the first slide that shows the biggest challenge, which is in this year. In the adopted budget, our anticipated revenue was about $57,930 with an anticipated beginning fund balance of just over $3 million. As you can see, our actual most recent forecast is significantly lower than that, with a difference of about $4 million just in this year. This was also a slide directly from our budget committee presentation and other presentations throughout the district internally that guided decision making. And this showed our anticipated reserves over a 4-year period. The two lines on the board on the screen represent the fact that the board has generally set goals, not this board, but previous boards and the board that adopted the budget have set goals of wanting between 5 and 10% of expenditures and reserves. And so those two lines represent that. And as you can see, we anticipated reserves in excess of that going forward. Unfortunately, a lot of these reserves just weren't there. Some were not. A major problem you will see is that overestimation of general fund revenue was probably the primary problem, or a primary problem, might be safer to say. You can see that in 2018-19 and 2019-20, the blue lines are budget, and you can see that our actual revenue exceeded our budget. And if you go back into the past, we have a long history of strong financial performance in this district, winning several different accounting awards. However, in 2020-21, things started to change somewhat slightly at first. And you can see that in this current school year, it's not actual revenue, it's estimated revenue because we haven't received it yet, but you can see that it's substantially below what our budget was. And these are general fund resources, and this is a combination of revenue and our beginning fund balance that we carry forward. That's why it says resources, not at the top. And a component of general fund resources, meaning what's available to spend in the general fund, is beginning fund balance. And you can see that up through first 3 years in this chart, our actual beginning fund balance was way ahead of budget. It started to turn in 21-22 and turned sharply in 22-23, contributing greatly to the problems we have today. And the compounded impact of the resource overestimation is over $4 million. $4 million in this year and almost $6.5 million over the course of 3 years. As Dr. Lyon said, expenses have remained within budgeted amounts. And you can see that continued right up through the most recent year. And it's a critical point. Dr. Lyon made it, but I would like to make it again, that staff at our schools and departments did a great job in managing their budget. They came in on or under budget, in many cases significantly under budget. Our challenges don't stem from overspending, but from budgetary practices that overestimated revenue. They managed the budgets they were given. The budgets they were given did not match the resources we had. And this is probably the most complex part of the presentation, and also may be the part that explains how this could happen. And I'll take some time to go through it. Inadequate financial reporting did not include reporting on revenue and projected ending fund balance. This is a snapshot of the June 30th preliminary financial summary as appeared in the board agenda. And we're looking at the general fund here, which you can see is here. And from reviewing this document, one might conclude, as I did, even when I started in my new role, that with a budget of $59 million and estimated expenditures of $57 million and a $2 million budget variance, that we were in pretty good shape. However, the missing piece on this is the revenue piece. So these numbers come directly from this sheet. There's just a lot of numbers and a lot of noise on this page. And so I just wanted to kind of break it down over the next couple slides. So these numbers match these same numbers here: adopted budget, actual to date. And I took these numbers directly from the June 30th summary. They don't tie out perfectly to numbers earlier in the report because the numbers have shifted a little bit since June 30th as we've booked more revenue into the system and made some adjustments to our books. So I just wanted to make that note. They're not off by a lot, but they shift a little bit. And it's intentional because I wanted to tie to our financial reporting. So it would appear from looking at this that we're in pretty good position. Well, here's what happens when you add the revenue picture to it. So these numbers, again, are based on that preliminary financial summary. You can see the adopted budget, $59 million. Let's start with the expense side. These are the same numbers of $59 million in revenue, $57 million a budget of $59 million, to date of $57 million, and there would be that $2 million delta between them. But when you bring in revenue, our adopted budget was $59.12, but our total resources available were only $56,850. So in that year where it appeared we were in good shape, we brought in $56.8 million and spent 57.3, which left us with a negative balance in our account. Not being able to end the year in an account, we used some one-time funds to bring, at least tying to the financial report, our ending fund balance to $870,000. So when you go through it this way, you can see how this problem was masked and hard for us to see as staff, as a board, as a community. And this is a transparent piece, and this is one of the changes we will obviously make, is to change our financial reporting. This has been the financial reporting structure for the district as far back as I looked and as far back as I can remember. This is not a change to a financial reporting structure. This has been in place even through the time way back before the times when our budget was super healthy. It's just when our budget took a turn, the weaknesses in our accounting procedures came back to bite us. Some other budgetary challenges. One is enrollment. This is a primary challenge we faced. I think it's important to note that enrollment drives revenue for school districts. When enrollment drops, revenue generally drops as well. One student unweighted is worth about $10,000. So just on a simple calculation, if you lose 400 students, you lose about $4 million. There were some kind of tweaks to that in the pandemic that are challenging to get into. In some years, we were held harmless for revenue for enrollment drops at the state. In other years, enrollment dropped across the state, so we got more money per kid and balanced it out. And in other years, it came back to get us. But enrollment is a serious challenge for the district. And the calculation is a touch more complex than revenue on the $10,000 per student, I said, because we get extra money per student for students if we have students navigating poverty, students in special education, students who are emerging bilinguals. We get additional funds from the state for those students. So I just want to be clear that it's not straight up $10,000 per every kid who walks into the district. It's a little bit different than that. Since our enrollment started dropping, we made some adjustments in positions. Between 2020-21 and 2020-22, we reduced 10 teaching positions, which included 6 cloud campus teachers. Between 2021-22 and 22-23, we reduced by an additional 4 teachers, plus an administrator and a classified staff member. Reductions were made, but they weren't sufficient to offset the reductions in enrollment. And they were based on numbers that led us to believe that we had sufficient funds to do it. And we wanted to hold on as a board, as a staff, as a community. We wanted to hold on to as many positions as we could to give the students the best possible service coming out of COVID. That said, if those reductions would have been made sooner than today, we would have had a longer runway and they would have been less biting and less sharp. Either way, based on these enrollment figures, reductions were coming. They're just coming in a shorter runway. Another pretty significant factor is our ESSER funding. And ESSER, these were federal emergency relief funds, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And you can, when you look at this chart, it shows some of our neighborhood schools, neighboring schools at the top, us at the top, so the board can see it. Some of our neighboring schools, and then other schools of similar enrollment size, just to try to give it some scale. On the far right, you'll see the dollars per student. Sherwood received $352 per student, and you can see how that compared to the rest of these students, or the rest of these districts. These funds are distributed based on the Title I funding formula, and Title I funds are allocated based on the number of students navigating poverty in the district, and they're based on census data. The last few years, our number of students who our funding for Title I has dropped sharply in the last few years, or several years ago, it made a sharp drop, and then it stayed fairly static. That's affected not only our state income and our Title I funding, but in the ESSER case, it made a significant difference. And you can see we received very little money on that basis. Only Lake Oswego received less than us. And these funds were provided recognizing the additional costs of doing business during the pandemic, like masks and gloves, improved ventilation, other personal protective equipment, online offerings, K-12 when schools reopened and some students were unable or unwilling to return, additional staff to manage these, increased sub costs when staff were out with COVID for 10 days or when they were out when they were a close contact of somebody. All the districts had these costs. The allocations of funds did not match that reality. And we were competing with districts who got significantly more funds with us. It's not the cause of the problem, but it is a factor in the problem. Moving on to short and long-term solutions. When I'm finished with this slide, I'll turn it over to, with a couple of slides, I'll turn it over to Claire Hertz and Angie Peterman, and they'll talk about more of our change in our practices and what we need to do so we don't end up here again. The short and long-term solutions I'll talk about are more to how we're going to adjust district operations to meet this current crisis. So this first slide is kind of a tough one, not kind of. Our targeted reduction between now and July of 2023 is $2.2 million. And this comes after drawing down our ESSER funds and other one-time funds. And it includes targeting an ending fund balance of $1 million. We would like to end the school year with $1 million in the bank. To do that, the reductions will include Obviously, the first thing on the list will be discretionary spending. And other potential will be staff reductions and instructional and non-instructional furlough days. When we get to 23-24, further reductions will be necessary. It's really hard to know the scope of those and the scale of those right now. There's a lot of different factors that will impact that. What happens with our enrollment? Does it go up? Does it go down? Does it stabilize? Oregon schools, our legislature meets on a biennial basis. And we're in the second year of the biennium now, so they'll set a budget for the next 2 years sometime this spring, and how they fund education will dictate a big part of this. How many people retire from the district? What does inflation do? And what are our grant allocations? All of those and other factors will play in. But I did want to be clear with the board and with the community and with our staff that those will be coming. So not what I wanted to report in my first report to the board, but we also wanted to be transparent and put out there what we discovered in the last 100 days. So with that, I'll turn it over to Claire Hertz and Angie Peterman. Let them talk through what they've discovered, and then we'll be happy to take your questions.
Good evening, Chair Hawkins, Board of Directors, staff, Superintendent Lyon. I am Claire Hertz, and this is my colleague Angie Peterman, and we are ANC School Business Consulting. And we were hired to complete a financial review of the last school year, ending June 30th, 2022, and to review the budget for the upcoming school year. The questions asked were, how do we get to this point financially? And what are the recommendations going forward? First, I'll address what happened. There's been a significant decline in the general fund ending balance in the last 2 years. So as you look at the chart, you can see the year ending June 30th, 2020 had $4.2 million in the general fund balance, or about 7.7% of operating revenue. 2 years later, June 30th, 2022, we had $776,000, or 1.4% of operating revenue. The primary reason for this spend down was during the pandemic, there was a 7.8% decline in enrollment, which lowered the amount of revenue coming in for both years. Simply stated, more money was being spent than resources received. The district used its fund balance or savings account to keep operating. When budgeting for 22-23, the expenses were rolled forward, and as our CFO mentioned earlier, revenue was overestimated in the adopted budget. So outside of general fund, there is also special revenue funds. The special revenue fund includes grants and donation funds. This portion of the special revenue fund is in good order, and the funds have been managed well. The district also has special revenue funds that are supported by general fund transfers. 4 of these funds are in the negative at the end of June 30th, leading to an overall negative fund balance of $708,000. The debt service fund, which is used to budget for paying back bonds, similar to how we pay back a mortgage at home. And the capital projects fund, which is where we spend the proceeds from a bond sale and is how the district has paid for the modernized school projects throughout the district. Both of these funds have been managed well. One final thing to mention about how we arrived to this point. There was a lack of close monitoring and reporting of the ending fund balance goals set by the board. The district leadership has asked for recommendations going forward. The district will need to make a mid-year course correction in the general fund. Expenditure levels will need to match the actual revenue received. After paying for utilities and property insurance, liability insurance, there is not much left outside of staff costs and small supply budgets. Since personnel costs are 83% of general fund spending, staff reductions will need to be made. These reductions will need to continue in future years because the enrollment that was lost has not been returned. The other thing to consider is should the district increase revenue to support the daily operations of the district. We recommend the district consider a local option levy and prioritize supporting classroom teaching positions from the proceeds. If you go back to the ESSER comparison slide with the districts that Gary had shared, the two comparable districts, Westland Wilsonville and Lake Oswego, both have substantial local option levies to support the general fund. There are some simple fixes to reestablish practices centered on the long-term health of the district. Our recommendations include staff providing quarterly financial reports to the board, including revenue, expenditures, and a projected fund balance for the general fund. We recommend creating a 3-year plan to restore the fund balance to the minimum 5% goal of the district. As the budget for 23-24 is developed, staff will provide a 5-year forecast to support the superintendent's proposed contingency and the board's approval and adoption of the budget reserve amount for the year. Finally, we recommend reducing the number of special revenue funds by moving operational expenditures back to the general fund. With that, I'll turn it back to district staff to open for questions.
All right, so thank you for those reports. 2 points to kind of highlight. We have a $2.2 million reduction problem for this school year. And as Gary made clear, we have used almost all of the one-time funds and kind of savings in our reserves to even get to that point. The beginning deficit was much larger, and to whittle it down to the 2.2 million, we pretty much emptied things out as best we can. Gary mentioned that we want to target a $1 million ending fund balance to start next year. That is not a desire that is just to have it. That is really essential in order to start the year to be able to operate the next year. So that is as our consultants have just indicated, that is a very, very low percentage point for a school district to have as a beginning fund balance, way off the marks that the Oregon Department of Ed and financial people say a school district should have as reserves. But it's a start, and that's the point of that. So with that, I'd like to open it up for board questions, and the 4 of us will attempt to do the best job we can answering those questions.
Just real quick, since you just brought it up, the $2.2 million deficit, is that inclusive of the 1 million goal at the end of the year, or the 1 million on top of the 2.2?
It's 2.2 to get us to
To get us
to get us to $1 million.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may. I'm heartbroken, angry, and frustrated that we're here. I've been on this board, as I said earlier, a long time, and the thing that I would say, kind of coming into tonight, that I would brag about this board is our very conservative approach to ending fund balances. The strong financial performance of this district, because it's not new that spending patterns are below budgeted amounts. That has been a hallmark of this district for a long time. And it is true that this district has won awards for our financial performance, and for the accounting procedures. So that we are here is shocking. And there are lots of words, but I'm editing them. I do want to ask some questions just to be very clear with the public about what the board and what the budget committee, because for those that may not be as familiar with this process, not only do we have a budgeting process where this board works early with staff to set an ending fund target. That is probably one of the biggest things that we focus on and look at. But it is something that we look at when we think about, as you mentioned, when we bargain, what is the net effect going to be on the ending fund balance? And I'm grateful that our association partners have long held that as a value, so that there are reserves there. So if the state goes into a downturn, that we aren't immediately a cut making mode. That's why we work so hard to establish reserves and have them between 5 and 10%. And so to protect us, so that we can maintain services for students, so that we don't start a program and then immediately end it. We've watched other districts go through that, and we set goals to avoid all of that, so that we're here, and that we're in this moment. I really want to lay the foundation about how hard all of those volunteers that have served on budget committees and on this board over time work to avoid this situation, and how inadequate the information we received to do that is. So I will take a crack at these questions, and hopefully someone will be able to answer. So starting first, I want to be clear that the information that Gary showed in the kind of, if we had, maybe ask this way, did the board ever see that we were using one-time funds and the net effect on that reserve reduction over the last 3 years? Were we informed of those utilizations of one-time funds, and that would then reduce the percentage of reserves?
So can you ask the question one more time? I just want to make sure I get the specifics right.
Yeah. So what I'm driving at is, without our knowledge, without it being reported to the board, that there were fiscal staff utilizing one-time funds to adjust down. Was the board informed that those activities were occurring, and that would have a reduction in the percentage of ending fund balance?
No, the board wasn't informed, and in some level, our financial reporting made that really hard to see, because if you look at the 200 funds, if I'm answering your question correctly, this is where those special revenue and this is where those negative accounts that Claire Hertz was referring to sit, but it's all rolled up together, and it makes it hard to see until you look at the actual account detail. And there are dozens and dozens of funds within the 200 fund level.
Thank you. That is a point I'm trying to drive home, that there was not a moment in time. In fact, the board was told differently. The board and the budget committee were both told differently, that in fact even after negotiating contracts, that our reserves would be in a healthy 8 to 10%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So there would be no way for us to be able to catch that, the fact that they were actually declining during that time.
Yeah, what, so there would have been no way in what you were shown by the budget committee or by staff that you could have seen that. What Claire was referring to was that in our 2021 audit, there wasn't, you could have seen that the ending fund balance dropped some, but that wasn't the big drop. That was one of those minor drops that I showed you.
That's right. I also want to ask you, over the last 2 years in 2020, in the year 2020, 2021, and earlier this year in 2022, when we received our audits, were they unqualified or what's referred to as clean audits?
They were, you agree they were clean audits, no findings? But 21,
Yeah,
22, we have not even begun, we have not even engaged with our auditors yet in the 21, 22 audit.
Okay, what I'm referring to is the one that we received earlier this year. So the audits that we've received over that period of time for ones that are complete, those have been clean audits. Is that right?
Correct.
And those were presented to the board as clean audits with no issues from management or lack of cooperation or documents.
That's correct.
Thank you. I also want to go back to the bond funds. Just be super clear. All of those dollars are exactly where they're supposed to be, that the promises we made to the community about the use of those funds, that those have been upheld.
Correct.
Yeah, those are, and then last but not least, in the close of the 2022 school year, those negative funds, particularly the ones that need to have positive balances, we have now sufficiently made sure that those funds were closed properly so that we are in compliance with federal and state requirements relative to those special funds.
We will be in compliance. We need to make a transfer in nutrition services. That's one of those funds. And that's one we have to bring forward, and we'll need to transfer money between funds. We will need a resolution from the board to do that, or supplemental budget. So we will bring that to you and we will take care of that and we will shore that one up. One of the accounts is a Medicaid claiming account. And so for those who don't know what that is, when we do a lot of things that we get reimbursed from the federal government, and on random days, we do a Medicaid claiming survey, and anything we do that supports students and getting them on Medicaid, a variety of things, the federal government reimburses us for those funds. And so we set up a special revenue fund to collect those revenues, which was the appropriate thing to do. We used to collect a lot more in revenue than we get now from those accounts. And in fact, we had quite a large surplus balance. And so we hired a couple of staff using those funds and put them in those funds. The rules changed. Our allotment shrunk every year and the staff didn't come out. And so now there's a couple $100,000 negative balance. And what we'll do is we'll pull those staff members out and we'll just use those Medicaid claiming funds to recoup that balance. So we'll deal with those two balances that way. And then there's one of the balances is fairly large, and it will take us a while. We'll have to do that over a period of time to avoid more significant reductions now.
And then I have one last question. I'm sure my colleagues have others.
Anything on this?
The individual that was in charge of this department prior to your accepting this new role, is that individual still employed by this district?
No,
Thank you.
he's not.
Upon recommendation, Director Thorne thought it might be prudent for us to just go down the line and begin with our questions. So I'm going to let you guys begin and I will wrap it up. Director Lee, if you have questions, do you want to go ahead instead of us popping in and out?
I only have one question. So this seems like it was a snowball growing. So I realize some of this might be speculation, but what was stopped or prevented by catching this now? Like what might have happened?
Can you just ask the question again? I want to make sure I
Yeah.
answer the right question.
So what by catching this financial problem now, what was prevented or stopped? what might have happened had we not caught this?
Well, I suppose you become insolvent potentially. I don't know. Do you have an answer to that? I'd be happy to answer it as well.
So it would have left the district in a deficit mode for the 21-22 fiscal year. But there was a transfer for one-time funds to bring it into a positive mode. And we do need to give accolades to Gary Bennett for recognizing the problem so quickly as he assumed a new role. By the end of July, he was already raising the yellow flag. And then by the beginning of August, it was the red flag that we need to really take a look at what has happened here.
I think an extension of that needs to be pointed out that Claire was just referring to the 2021-22 school year that required transfer of funds to close those books in the positive. Had Gary not identified this problem in this current budget year, now we know we need to make corrections, it would have been much, much larger at the end of this year without any of those one-time resources that we have already used to shore up the 21-22 school year. So this thing was escalating quickly, and that is what was caught in July and August.
I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you for the financial review that you provided. It was very thorough and very understandable at how everything's broken down. I just really want to thank Mr. Bennett for finding this so quickly and jumping on it and raising the red flag, like you said. I mean, walking into a new role and finding that right off the bat. I mean, we are just so blessed that you caught that as soon as you did, before it caused more damage. Just thank all of you for addressing this so quickly. The district appreciates it.
I'm sorry, one more question. So we found this early, mid to late July. We're here in October. Can you talk to us? Because I think one of the hallmarks of our new superintendent's tenure is transparency. Can you talk to us about the process that has been underway for the last 100 days and what we've been doing that is taken until now for us to be able to share this with the public?
Well, let me share my perspective as a newcomer into this. It really wasn't mid-July that the red flag went up. July was more of an exploratory and a sorting out. And we mentioned in here that there were some confusing accounting practices. And that's noted in the report where some accounts were due money, but also owed money. And so there were some little rabbit holes that Gary was going down to try to figure out what was going on. That consumed July. The concerns were growing. In early August, we said we need to do something. And Claire and Angie were so grateful to help us out. They had not started their consulting business yet. We asked them that please come and take a look at this, and they were very gracious in doing so. And it took them time to get in there because you want to be right? You want to be right. And this was Gary's hope, that he just was missing an essential piece here because the reports were all so good. He wasn't missing an essential piece. So I would say, in my estimation, the red flag went up in September. The red flag went up in early September, where we really were confirming at that point. And I do underscore the numbers, we continue to work on them up to and including today. So this is fluid, and this is still in motion in regards to accurately defining that position. The unfortunate trend line here is there's never a find necessarily that's like, aha, we have a positive to report. It's either staying neutral or it's our position worsens. But we think we've got it with the 2.2 million identification. We think we've got it right. Gary, do you want to expand anything on that timeline?
I would just add that, for one, I knew in a school district, for example, you take in property taxes in July and August and they get booked back into June because they're from that year. They're taxes paid from that year, but they come to you later. And so there's a lot of revenue, actually even revenue from the state that comes in July and August. And as I was sorting through all of this, and honestly, this report was part of it. I was thinking, how can we be $2 million under budget and be underwater on our expenditures? And then as we continued to book revenue in, revenue did continue to come in and the problem got better and better, but it never went away. The other part of the process, I think, is Dr. Lyon referred to, was me just wanting to be sure and being new to the role. And honestly, the way a lot of you feel right now, I felt in sort of mid-August when I was sitting in my office figuring this out, this sort of sense of shock. And before I wanted to make sure I was right and there wasn't something I was missing, because it seemed like there had to be.
I really appreciate that. I just want the community to know we did the due diligence. We brought in experts to be able to go through our books to make sure that by the time we came here, that we had a real number, that all of the opportunities had been scrubbed and considered, so that this is the best information as soon as we had it to reasonably share with this group. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate the work and leaning into the problem and addressing it. It is dreadful that we're here, but I am grateful for the leadership thus far and for what's yet to come.
Thank you. And before I forget, I had in my notes to thank Claire and Angie for their really sort of tireless work on this. I met them both at a conference this summer, and probably the most foolish thing they did was give me their business cards and let me know who they were, because I quickly took advantage of it. And they weren't ready to start their business yet. They wanted to take a few months off between that and had some things going, and they quickly came to work before they were even set up. Did a lot of work with me one-on-one, pro bono, and have been there every time I've called, texted, emailed, day or night, and have been just invaluable. And I just really wanted to thank you before we got too much farther along, because it's made a huge difference in my ability to help us move forward and just my knowledge base in general. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Because the amount of work that had to be shifted through or documents, data, numbers, everything in this short amount of time to get us these numbers so quickly, I can't even imagine. Can't wrap my head around it, actually. So thank you so very much. And again, Gary, I've told you that a lot, but thank God that you started your new role when you did. And this district is I mean, we are in a mucky situation that we're gonna see it through, because we have a lot of great people in this town, and we have a lot of smart people in this town, and we have a lot of really good leaders. But thank God that you started when you did, and that you found this as quickly as you did. I'm grateful to you and to Dr. Lyon for your work on this. A couple questions, and please forgive me in advance if I bounce around, because I'm listening to all this and I'm just like scribbling stuff down as I'm still trying to listen. So I'll do my best to not bounce around, but I'll also do my best to be quick. So speaking of due diligence, even with this presentation, there's a lot of how and a lot of why and a lot of confusion. I'd like to start by asking, has local law enforcement been contacted regarding this issue, as well as our attorneys? And is there the intent to investigate this further on those levels?
So I can answer that. We recognized we have a responsibility for due diligence sake to report this and to communicate with law enforcement officials. And so out of that abundance of caution and the due diligence, we are in communication with 2 law enforcement agencies regarding what we have here before us and ask them to take a look at it.
And attorneys as well?
And our attorneys are also involved in providing us counsel regarding options and things that we need to be looking at regarding this situation.
Okay. So, I believe it was 2020, is that correct, when the controller resigned?
We had a position, the district, actually, let me have Gary explain that. He was here.
Okay.
She resigned, I believe it was sometime in 2020, August of 2020, maybe. I'm not exactly sure, but it
Okay.
was sometime in that period of time.
And she worked closely with the CFO, obviously.
She did. He was the director of finance that she worked
Director of
closely with.
Finance. Okay. And so when she departed, who was then responsible for providing these figures, accurate figures, to the board? And who was responsible for verifying and double checking these figures, i.e., who was responsible for providing the figures and who was responsible for oversight of those figures for accuracy?
I don't know about the oversight piece. It would have been the director of finance for bringing those forward, but ultimately that is the responsibility of that position. When the controller left, we did hire another half-time person who's no longer employed with the district, who was also a CPA. And that would have been part of our replacement of the controller. So we lost a full-time controller. We had a couple of different staff changes, hired a half-time person. But ultimately that's the job of the director of finance,
Okay.
and ultimately me in this case, of bringing these numbers to you now.
Presently you.
Yes,
but
yes.
then-
Currently me. I want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, presently. So the director of finance, and was there anybody else involved in that? I mean, the superintendent and the director in finance were ultimately the ones where the buck stopped and provided us the information.
So, and I said this in the interview with all of you, the buck does stop with the superintendent. It's just the nature of the game. And, there's a saying in the superintendent world that you're responsible for everything and you control nothing. And there is a little bit of truth in that, not totally true. But in reality, that is the role of the superintendent, to ensure that the fiscal reporting and accounting is accurate and correct to the best of that superintendent's abilities. And so in terms of the chain of command, you have a governance structure where you have a fiscal manager who is supervised by an individual in the district, but reports those numbers to the superintendent and works directly with the superintendent to craft the budget message that goes to the budget committee, of which we have a few members here this evening, and thank you for being here. And they take a look at it, and then that budget proposal is brought forth to the board. So the governance structure is solid, but it all depends on what's happening with the generation of the out of the different
reports.
accounts. Yep.
Okay. So, and this is breaking it down a little bit. I wrote down, how is there an overestimation of general fund revenue? When the revenue was being determined off of enrollment, and this enrollment then dropped significantly. I'm just wrapping my head, and for other people that understand have the same question. So the enrollment dropped significantly. That you have projected numbers. Is it then is it the conclusion that the numbers, the budget was not accounting for that drop? It just sort of remained the same, that drop just essentially didn't exist within this budget creation?
That is a key question that I'm about to turn over to the experts, but I think it's really important that that key question is exactly kind of made known how key that is.
Yeah.
School district funding is based on how many kids you have. And it's a fairly straightforward calculation, although it gets complicated when you start adding the weights for different groups of students. And it's complicated, but at the end of it, you get your number. And it's based entirely on your student enrollment. And so the most important number for a school district is how many students you are projecting and how many students you have. And you base all your financials in regards to revenue off of that. It has become more complicated in the last few years as the state has shifted towards a grant-based kind of structure. But with that, I think that answer is really important on how did we get overestimation of revenue with dropping enrollment?
With the obvious dropping enrollment. Yes.
I don't have a super solid answer for you. I don't know for sure how it happened. I didn't do the calculation, and it's hard to know for sure. I do know that some factors played into it potentially. It could have been a spreadsheet error someplace where there was something wrong in a spreadsheet. I don't know. And it also got kind of complex that when you get funded on a per student basis, but the legislature sets aside money, and this is conjecture. I honestly don't know the answer to this question, but the legislature sets aside a pot of money for the entire state for how much they're going to dedicate to the state school fund. And if enrollment drops across the state like it did during the pandemic, then districts get more per student than they would have gotten if all of those students showed up. So at some points in the pandemic, it looked like even though our enrollment dropped, because our enrollment drop was proportional with the state, we were going to get almost the same amount of money. Could that have contributed to it? I don't know. The answer is I just don't know. I don't know how the calculation was done or how the number was arrived to.
Okay.
Do you have something to add to that?
Thanks. So I think, as Gary said, none of us were here and we don't know what calculations were done. But I can tell you a number of factors that districts were dealing with during that time period. So 1920, we get COVID, we close our schools, and we're going to continue to see funding at the same student enrollment number that we've seen historically. 2021 comes along. We don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, we're still dealing with all the COVID issues. And so there's still a hold harmless in the formula. So when you're looking at the number of students that you're going to be funded for, you're going to get funded on what you estimate your current number to be or what the prior year's number was, whichever's higher. And that's intended to give you a year, if you will, to deal with declining enrollment going forward. So while I can't begin to guess the thought process, I suspect in 2021, part of the issue would have been just that, not knowing exactly where we're going to be, not knowing exactly what if the state was going to continue to hold us harmless at 1920 numbers as of December of 19, because that's what they did in 2020 or 1920. But I can tell you then the conjecture starts as to, we're going to go back to school. How many kids are going to come back? Are we going to see all of the kids that left with the pandemic return? When are we going to see those kids return? And so I think that part of it is being overly optimistic, potentially, in looking at students and thinking and projecting that we're going to see more of our kids return in a shorter time frame than actually happened.
And so making essentially a budget that was a hopeful one versus an
Optimistic.
actual one.
And let me add to that, because if you read the budget message for this school year, the superintendent identifies the correct number. And so this school year's budget did actually have the correct 400 less student enrollment number identified in the cover letter. So it had been, the student count had been reconciled,
But the budget had not.
but apparently the budget had not.
So that role should have been immediately when that number was adjusted, there should have been action taken to correct that budget. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm almost,
That's the budget for this year that we're in right now.
yeah,
The number in the superintendent's budget message was. Thank you.
repeat that?
So this is for this school year, and in the superintendent's budget message, where the enrollment number that the budget was to be based on was laid out, the number was accurate and correct. The challenge is that the revenue that corresponded with that number was not correct,
hadn't been adjusted.
had not been adjusted or calculated on a wrong number. That's the part that I just don't know. I don't know why.
Okay. Jeff, I'm almost done. I know you have a question, unless you want to go ahead and ask it.
It was just a follow-up on what you were asking. so
Oh,
just
yeah, go for it.
piggybacking on that. So to understand the assumptions made by the numbers that were calculated, that requires a full investigation. Is that correct? Is that one of the reasons? I mean, the interviews with people who are doing it, following, because we have to know their mindset and their thought process. So that will require full investigation, won't it?
Yes.
You know, our duty is to gather what we know, the documents. And that is for someone else outside the purview of the district if we're going to pursue it, to investigate and draw the conclusion of. That is not in the view of the school district.
But that is why my question earlier, that local law enforcement has been contacted, attorneys have been contacted, and there is the intent for further investigation.
You know, there's when you are a public official, you have this responsibility to be a good steward of public dollars. Now, it's always in budgets, you're always, month by month, squaring it up. The troubling part here is that there were enormous opportunities to square up the budget, but this persistent overestimation of revenues over 3 years, that needs further investigation as to what happened there and why did that happen.
Thank you.
You've heard some of the factors related to the pandemic.
Right.
Those are absolutely valid. It was a time unlike any in the entire history of American public education. So it was very volatile, but we don't know. We're collecting the information to the best we can.
Because we have to assume that the actual general fund balance was, I mean, how is that, how did the previous financial controller not know that actual figure? I mean, I'm speculating a little bit, right? But he's giving us a number, establishing a budget with our superintendent, but he's not bringing that number out of thin air. They're looking at the numbers.
No, and there's a scenario where he was convinced that revenue estimate was accurate. Now, we don't know. We don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Relative to that overestimation, as I think the team has noted, this has happened over time. So there wasn't a point at which it all of a sudden, like, voila, we have an extra $20 million that we didn't know about. Like there wasn't the ability to say, okay, well, that jump doesn't make any sense. And then all of a sudden we have all of this extra revenue. It was a slow growth of revenue. Again, accounting for all of those things that you talked about, that there was a statewide decline in student enrollment. So an adjustment of the K-12 numbers statewide. Weights shift over time. And so the amount of money adjusted with that, along with federal funds and what that looked like and whether you're going to hold 19. So the ability for an entity like a budget committee or a board, there wasn't a point in time, just I'm asking this as a confirmation, there wasn't a point in time where we would have seen a dramatic growth in resources such that we would go, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Is that accurate?
I think that's accurate. I think you're either, as a school district, growing with student enrollment or declining. You're not staying the same. When you begin a decline, the very first student that declines in terms of leaving your district and your count is lower from one year to the next, you learn very quickly, you must go into cut mode immediately. And for us to have a drop of 400 students, which, as Gary indicated, is close to $4 million, this district should have been in deep, deep structural adjustment mode and was not.
Yeah.
Now, why that didn't happen and the pandemic related factors is just speculation. But the reality is, any school district, when you start losing students, you have to immediately make structural changes. And that did not occur here, although Gary did reference some staff reductions, some pulling back, but just really not to be adequate for the kind of enrollment drop that hit the district.
Our general fund balance that was provided to us for the in June 2022, the balance that was on that, what was that figure?
This is the slide you're referring to.
Okay. What is it right now?
On this slide, it says $870,000. I think in Angie and Claire's report and on ours, it was at 775. And as we've moved some things around and booked a little more in there, I think today it sat at about 913.
Okay.
So a little bit better than this. And we had to pick a point in time at which to drop our documents and do our
Right.
reports. And so
Right.
Total resources, the adopted budget had a $2.7 million beginning fund balance.
we had in this, yeah, the adopted budget showed us can you ask that question again?
The 2.724 on the far right, actual use of one-time funds for the beginning fund balance. Is that the correct number?
That is the correct number. We carried forward to 21-22, $2.7 million.
But then when you put expenditures against it, it evaporates.
That's correct.
Okay. And so we have the goals for this year to get us through the end of the 2023 school year. But then as noted, there's going to be additional actions needed to not further the situation. Otherwise, we're looking at that bigger because the numbers in my mind are a lot. My calculations are there's a much bigger deficit that it could be, but we're working slowly to resolve that. So we're not really addressing that fully at this point. Is that correct?
The plan that Claire and Angie put together and that we also think makes a lot of sense is over the course of 3 years to get up to a 5% ending fund balance and deal with those negative fund balances in the other accounts and make the structural changes necessary to get there.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. And so last but not least, as more information comes to light, just to assure the community, this will be presented, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for all of your work and for taking the time to answer my question.
Hi. Okay, so I mean, I think it goes without saying, I'm incredibly disappointed, right? To hear that this is the state we're in. I know we all feel deceived. We all feel protective of teachers, of kids. This is not a place I wanted to be in, that's for sure. So I'm grateful. I'm not really a silver lining person, but I'm grateful that this change did result in this, because while you guys are able to sit there and say, we just need to fix it, we're going to figure out how, I'm still very angry. And I know our community will be too. So I do not forget that. And I think that we are going to have to be able to the best of our ability answer what we know and why. And I do understand that right now we don't know that why, although it drives me absolutely crazy. I understand that we don't know that why. So to move forward, one thing I want to know desperately is, how are we going to be receiving reports that look different? Because even this per se, I mean, I'm a bookkeeper, right? I'm not a CPA, but like, I can run a quick report on my books and I can see all of my chart of accounts, but that is not what we receive. So had I been given that, not saying that we're necessarily entitled to that, but had I been given that, I feel like in 30 seconds, I would have said, oh my God, what is happening with several of these accounts? But that's not what we received. So I do understand there's an intention to give us more specific reports, but how do we know and ensure that those reports are still accurate? Yeah, and really showing the full picture.
That's a great question. One of the things that I haven't started to work on yet, but I will once we sort of get this whole plugged in and moving forward, is what does our financial reporting look like? I've looked at what other districts do. And we need a more complete financial report. It won't look like this, even though it says a more complete financial report. It will need to be more thorough than what's here. I don't know if that's what you're asking. This was just a way to sort of highlight what it looks like, but we will need to do an overhaul of our financial reporting.
Yeah, and I think the reporting is one aspect of it, but really what's behind that is, do you have a fiscal department that has the adequate staffing to have the redundancy necessary to make sure this never happens again? And so that is when we, frankly, when we lost the controller in 2020, it seems as if one of those guardrails was taken away. And if that's the case, if that guardrail was taken down that provided that redundancy, we need to restore that guardrail ASAP. And Claire and Angie in their report have recommendations regarding what needs to happen inside the fiscal department, including much more transparent financial reporting to the board and to the budget committee. And exactly.
And I absolutely agree with Krista. I think it's auditing of departments, but we pay an auditor every year to come in here and look at our accounts and tell us what's real and what's not and what we should be concerned about. I remain very concerned that what we're getting are clean audit reports without raised concerns. So I think the other thing I'm looking forward to is a conversation about how we ensure that our audits are doing what they should do, which is being an independent third-party check on our processes and catching things early so that we can make course corrections well in advance.
It is the top of the mind question, is why didn't the auditors identify this problem? How could we go multiple years on paper with more or less clean audits without any commentary on some of the things that were happening to the school district? And it is a question that we are pursuing.
Okay, I'm going to keep it together. Sorry, I just was so angry. I will keep it together for the remaining questions I have here. To that point, there was a comment, Mr. Bennett, you made about, we had a CPA, I guess, that was hired after that controller that was part-time. Does that person still work here, or?
No, she's no longer here.
What was the reason that person?
She
left it?
just resigned her position and moved on elsewhere.
And then the district just didn't fill it?
That was just in the last few months, actually. That I don't believe that was part of this challenge. I was just trying to get the course of events of staffing in our sequence that we lost the controller. We were coming out of the bond. We were trying to reduce staff. We went down, we added, and we had a couple staff come and go for short periods of time. And then we've been stable for the last several months. And 2 of the staff members have been there for a long, long time and do really good work.
In the financial department?
Yes.
This report that we've received, this is gonna be linked and made public, correct?
The 13-page report from our consultants, we intend to post on the website. Yes.
Okay,
In that report, there is some information, particularly regarding a table, that we feel compelled that we're going to need to put some explanatory notes on. And here's the reason why. What was presented in the report out of the 200 special funds regarding some of the account deficits were more accounting practices than they were anything reflective of the services being provided to children and students in the school district. And I'll be more specific. The nutrition services account had a combined deficit north of $500,000. That was an accounting process that had nothing to do with serving children lunches in our schools. That money was being spent to serve lunches to students to the letter of the program and to the capacity of the school district. But over here, you see it in this 200 fund as a deficit. It is erroneous to make a connection that that deficit had anything to do with the quality of services. Same thing happens in the 200 fund with the account for athletics. It shows a deficit. Accounting, nothing to do with the program that's being offered. Same thing with bus replacement, another account that had a negative balance, absolutely nothing to do with busing. And then the Medicaid reimbursement was the other negative account. There are 4 negative accounts that are fairly sizable that were being covered by the general fund year in and year out so that those programs could run to the standards set by the Sherwood School District. So when you look at that chart, we're going to need to provide some explanatory notes because it's an accounting function, not a performance function of the school district. And did I misstate that in any way? No. Okay.
no, I appreciate that. I mean, I know you know that is like, what was one of my first questions is why are there deficits sitting in these,
And it's a
Why
great and
these
logical
over-
question.
something else? And like, what's the tie-in? And so to my understanding and to your understanding, it's just that those accounts were what was chosen, but for no particular reason.
Well, why were they chosen?
I think they ran at a deficit. Most school districts our size don't generate enough revenue in what they charge for lunches and get from the federal government to support a nutrition services program. And so they have to subsidize those accounts, but a transfer wasn't made from the general fund into nutrition services to backfill that. Same is also true with the athletic fund. All districts support athletics. There's not enough funds raised from student fees to pay for all of the things that go into paying for an athletic program. And so there weren't sufficient funds transferred in and those were carried forward. That one was compounded by reducing fees to almost nothing during the pandemic when families were struggling to allow kids to play sports and make finances not a barrier. And that also added to that fund also. That makes sense.
Madam Chair, can I just ask, I just want to, because there are a lot of families out there that pay a lot in fees for whether it's an athletic program or band or a wide range. I just want to assure people, and I'm asking this question, can we look folks in the eye and say to them, those fees went into those programs and were spent appropriately in those expenses, notwithstanding the fact that we're showing a fund deficit there?
100%, 100%.
Thank you.
And let's be clear on what should have happened annually. Let's take nutrition services. So it is supplemented by the general fund, and it does run a deficit. We don't get enough dollars from the federal government. At the end of the year, the proper thing to do would be to transfer those general fund dollars. They'd already been calculated, already been budgeted, and it negates that and brings that account flush, clean. That's what we'd like to know from the auditors. How did you go past those negative balances in particular?
So I do think it would be wonderful to have more explanation about that on the website, like
Okay.
you're alluding to, because I think that we already have this massive scope problem on our hands, and it's really hard. It's hard to understand, and we've had more time to understand it than people at home. And so they're already going to be trying to wrap their heads around what we've got going on here. And I don't want that to complicate it if that's not a piece of the puzzle. I know you guys were just trying to be transparent and truly show those accounts, and I do appreciate that. I just want to make sure there's enough explanation there to tie into that.
Yes.
Okay, my last question, and then we can wrap it up. Just to be clear, when we talk about the money we received based on the projections for our enrollment, we are saying that we thought we were doing our budget based off this number, but the reality is we had this many students. But from a just straight money perspective, were we receiving funds at the higher amount and then that money was getting taken back? Or were we just not receiving that amount of funding? We were actually getting the correct number? Because I know there's like that lag, right?
You're right. It depends on the year. And I'd have to go back and look, but there were years where we collected each month more than we were supposed to collect. And then the way the state school fund works is we get paid for this year. We get a check from ODE essentially once a month. We get 2 in 1 month and then one payment for 10 months. We get 12 months worth of payments. And then this school year will actually be reconciled in May of 24 based on how many kids actually show up and the revenue and all that things. And then an adjustment is made. And in the past year, 21-22, we had a significant adjustment and revenue was pulled back from us after it was received. And that is part of our problem. So we did receive money and then have a negative adjustment because the budget wasn't done correctly up front. It's a little bit complex and weedy, but that's what happens. And every May, the prior year is reconciled, and depending on how accurate your budget was, you get a little bit more or a little bit less based on what that looks like.
Madam Chair, I have one more question that I remember right after I found out this. I didn't ask right away, but I am sure that I want to ask a question that may be on the minds of our public. Is what we, based upon all of our review and the digging through the documents, is the problem we have here at a minimum a monumental screw up, an error? Or do we have a case where we've got funds having existed but been transferred elsewhere? Do we have somebody that was stealing from the district, or do we have a massive screw up here?
We have no evidence that anybody's been stealing money. Our internal controls have been in place. It appears to be more on the massive mess up side, not more on it. Appears to be wholly that. I see no evidence, and we'll continue to look for it. And if we see it, we'll certainly be transparent with it. But I think it's more that. And the money being reconciled was money going back to the state. I want to be clear on that. And the whole state reconciled. Every district in the state gets a reconciliation adjustment in that May of the following year.
Thank you. You have one more question.
Real quick, sorry. So moving forward, because we've already had a lot of questions and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more from the public. So what's the plan in addressing the public's questions moving forward?
Right. I mentioned it in the introduction, but tomorrow we are having staff meetings with every staff member in the school district during the professional development day. We're starting with all of the elementary staff at Ridges, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And then we're rolling into 3 other staff meetings middle school, high school, and district office. And then on Monday, we have another one. That's going to include a Q&A. Obviously, most of it will be questions and answers related to this. And we'll start putting together some more or less frequently asked questions kinds of things. And then we've got 2 superintendent listening sessions, 1.5 hour sessions with our full executive team and the public scheduled, tentatively scheduled, one at the high school and one here at district office. And those will occur within the next 3 weeks. In the meantime, we will be working with the administrative team within the district and with both associations who have been just fantastic in this process, very collaborative. And we are going to work directly and transparently with them and with the administrative team to identify the $2.2 million proposal for this school year. That proposal will be presented fairly quickly. I expect early November, and that includes one of our things we're doing tonight is calling for some new budget committee members. And my hope is that on the November 9th board meeting, we're appointing 2 more budget committee members, giving us a full budget committee. And then I'd like to have a budget committee meeting to review all of this and potentially review the proposed cuts that then come to the board for review, and we make those cuts. The clock is ticking. We have to make cuts in short order to achieve the savings that we must achieve. And that's going to be a very difficult process. There's no 2 ways about it.
Well, I think it goes without saying, I mean, my anger and frustration is like way up here, but I have to thank you guys so much for the job you are doing and leading us. This is not a rosy, shiny report at all, but I know that you guys have put in so many hours and just countless, amounts of emotion and frustration in this yourself. I know this is not something either of you asked for. I mean, you just joined our district and this is not what you thought you were walking into. And I know, Mr. Bennett, you thought this was a completely different situation that you were transitioning into. So I feel poorly that is where we're at, but I am so grateful that you guys are the ones leading us because you have had so much integrity in your responses and you have been so transparent and answered questions, a lot of questions that some of us have had at all different hours of the day. So I really can't ask for more than that. I know that we are all going to move forward with supporting everything we need to do in this district, even though it's going to be hard, and do what we can to change things and turn it back around.
We are very committed to solving this.
Yeah.
Very committed. And we will see this thing through to right this ship, build that multi-year plan, execute that plan, and restore this district to financial stability as quickly and as soundly as possible with built-in guardrails that assure this never happens again. And that is the commitment.
Thank you. All right, if we don't have any other questions, we'll conclude this presentation. I know that there are many of us in this room that are ready for a quick recess, but Mr. Bennett has one more short presentation. So I'm going to let you go ahead with yours, and then we are going to take just a quick recess and come back.
Thank you, Chair Hawkins. I just wanted to formally announce that we have 2 open budget committee positions. I'm going to put on my glasses so I give you the right date. We're seeking qualified applicants to fill 2 vacancies. The applicant will serve on the budget committee for a 3-year term beginning November of 2022 and through June 30th of 2025. Applications are due by 4 p.m. on November 2nd, 2022. Right now, the application is available in the board packet. It will be on our website by tomorrow morning. There are only 3 qualifications required to be a budget committee member. You have to be a resident within the Sherwood School District, to be a legally registered voter, and you cannot be an officer, agent, or employee of the district. So anybody who's interested in taking one of those positions, that deadline again is November 2nd for turning in that application.
Thank you. I
Thank
would
you.
encourage anybody who feels led to apply. We certainly could use all hands on deck right now. So we will take a short recess and be back in about 5 minutes. Is that okay? All right, I'm going to interrupt you guys so that we can get this meeting back in session. We're all back from recess, so let's call this meeting back to order. And we are going to continue with our information section. And I will welcome Ms. Carroll to the podium to discuss our Division 22 assurances.
All right. Thank you, Board Chair Hawkins, Dr. Lyon, and board members. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about compliance and our Division 22 standards of assurances. So what are the Division 22s? Division 22s are rules that are adopted by the State Board of Education and go into Chapter 581, which is ODE's, or the Oregon Department of Ed's agency number. There are 26 divisions within the chapter that rules can be assigned to. When rules are assigned to Division 22, they become part of Oregon standards for elementary and secondary schools. The educational standards that the Oregon legislature or the state board has determined must be met in order to be a standard school district in Oregon. Compliance of the Division 22 standards ensures every student in Oregon receives a baseline level of service. Oregon Department of Education is committed to providing a high quality educational experience for all students across the state. And that is why they've created the Division 22 standards. It articulates the absolute floor, not the ceiling. And compliance with Division 22 Oregon administrative rules ensures a basic level of service that every student gets to receive. Now, the Division 22 standards are organized into these categories. There are over 50 rules within all of these categories. They are in large buckets, as you can kind of see. We have teaching and learning, health and safety, district performance and accountability, and human resources and staffing. And then within those, there are subcategories, as you can see in the chart. A few examples of the specific rules within each bucket are required instructional time, human sexuality education, comprehensive school counseling. Also in the teaching and learning, we have our administration of state assessments, identification of tag students, different credit options. In our health and safety, we have the Every Student Belongs, suicide prevention plan, safety of school sports, like concussions. In district performance and accountability, we have things like our complaint procedures. And in human resources or our staffing, we have fingerprinting, we have teacher-related dyslexia training, things like that. For our Sherwood School District for the 21-22 school year, there's been a couple of different changes to the Division 22 standards. All right. So we received some waivers. We received a waiver around assessment of essential skills. That is the graduation requirement, and that was largely in part of the pandemic in that response. So we did not have to have students take the essential skills requirement, and that holds for 22, 23, and 24. We still are required to do all of our local performance assessments. And then another waiver that happened was the kindergarten assessment. So we did not participate in the kindergarten assessment as it was waived. We did not participate in that kindergarten assessment this year either. There is also one new rule, and that was around operation plans. It requires districts to submit an operational plan to the Department of Ed, and this requirement will carry over to next school year. Okay, there are 3 steps that every district has to take in order to go through the Division 22 assurances process with the state. So the first is reporting to the local school board, which is what I'm doing here tonight. The other one is providing a community report on compliance on our district website. We have to have that done by November 1st. And finally, we will be submitting our assurances form to ODE by November 15th. In Sherwood, in summary, we are compliant on the majority of the standards. We are implementing approved corrective action on 4 of the standards, and we're currently out of compliance and implementing corrective action on 3 of the standards, and I'll go into detail about each of those. Last year, as many of you know, we were not in compliant with our instructional materials adoptions, and we were in a process of corrective action. We were able to complete that corrective action by adopting the social science K-5. That was our last one on the list, and we are now complete as of fall 2022. Other corrective action that we implemented is our reporting on Division 22 assurances, our prevention education in drugs and alcohol, the plan that was recently passed, and our suicide prevention plan. All of those are completed. We have a couple of items that we are proposing corrective action with the state, and we have a timeline to complete those. So last year, we were unable to meet the required PE minutes for grades K-5 and grades 6 through 8. Our plan is to meet with staff and look for additional opportunities to add physical education activities throughout the school day. We will create a plan to come into compliance and, if necessary, adjust our master schedules to do so. In addition, we had a required instructional time for seniors that we did not meet last year. Seniors did not meet the 966 total hours, and that was largely due to the wellness days that we took throughout the school year. Our master calendar has been adjusted this calendar year to meet those, and so we will be compliant. Finally, our Health and Safe Schools plan was submitted last year, and it was accepted, but it was not approved. Our team is working with ODE to correct the plan, and you will see that come up, and because we will seek board approval for that plan this year. Okay, looking ahead, there's some new changes coming. So we have always something new. So we do have some new revised rules. We have even more physical education requirements around middle school. So bumping that number up to 225 minutes. So we'll be working on that simultaneously while working on our last requirement for minutes. Like I mentioned before, the operational plans, they'll roll into this year as well. And we will be required to work with our voluntary organizations because they must adopt and implement policies prohibiting discrimination and maintain a complaint process with sanctions, as well as administer an annual survey. We'll hear more about what that all entails to do that work. a couple more things. One of them is around programs and services for tag students. So districts will need to post our most current tag plan on the district website, as well as have it available upon request. We will also need to update our annual tag contact information. That's something we already do. And then parents and students will have the right to discuss the tag plan with the district. And all tag plans are going to be due on May 1st, 2023. In addition to programs and services for tag students, we will also be looking at identification of academically talented and intellectually gifted students. And every district has to have a person who's responsible for the identification, and that person must be trained. Nope. Oh, maybe that's it. That's it. That's the end. Any questions? It's not working.
Miss Carol, for those watching and following along, our Division 22 requirements, are they optional?
They are not optional. No. And that goes to, this is the baseline standard. If we do not meet them, the Oregon Department will provide us technical assistance in doing so.
Are we having technical issues or are you complete?
I'm next.
I know you're
Oh.
next, but that part of the presentation is done.
That is done.
Perfect. Okay.
Sorry.
I know we were joking about it. I'm like, maybe there's more. Okay, well, you get to continue on with your curriculum adoption report. I wasn't sure. For the 2022-2023 school year. I'm guessing there's a presentation maybe for that.
There is.
I mean, why wouldn't there be?
It's a long night.
Why wouldn't there be?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, Board Chair Hawkins, Dr. Lyon, and board members. Tonight, I'm here to update you on our curriculum adoptions. So we'll talk a little bit about our instructional materials and the content areas that we'll be adopting this year. I'll share a little bit about phase 1, our materials audit and planning, and then phase 2, our instructional materials pilot and review, and some next steps. This is a table from the Oregon Department of Education, and it is the current instructional materials adoption schedule, which is released by ODE that all school districts have to follow. We are currently working through our English language arts and English language proficiency adoption. And as you can see, we postponed that last year because we were working on so many of our other adoptions trying to come into Division 22 compliance. And so we postponed that. We started the work in the spring, and that one will be one of our main instructional materials adoptions for this year. In addition, this is the year for math adoption, and our 6th through 12th grade math adoption is on track to take place this year. Our K through 5 adoption, our current publisher of our instructional materials just announced that they are updating materials and releasing a new version. That version likely won't be released until the spring. We would want to do a review of those materials as well as other materials, so we will likely postpone that one for 1 year, but we will come to the board with that at a later date. Okay, so during phase 1 in the materials audit and planning process, the purpose of this phase is really to use data and understand our current student achievement as well as assess our existing courses and grade level content. During this time, we spent a lot of time researching best and current practice that are happening in the discipline. And we identify and align current resources from previous adoptions. The teaching and learning team builds adoption committees, and those committees analyze new state standards that are released the year prior to the adoption. They review current instructional practices. We review a lot of local assessment and state achievement data, and review our current assessment practices. During this time, teams of teachers identify essential standards from the standards, and they start creating their learning targets. We also create a vision for our work and determine our philosophy. Something new that we're adding to our work is creating a position paper. In the past, we've done some framework process work, but we're going to include a position paper as well. In addition, we really take time to audit our current curriculum, go through it, and our existing course offerings. Sometimes state standards change, and this is especially impactful at the high school, and you have to create new pathways for graduation. And so that's part of this pre-work. Before we even look at materials, we really have to look at the standards. We have to ensure our students have a path towards graduation. Sometimes that's phased in at the freshman level. And so we have to do quite a bit of preparation in advance. Finally, the teaching and learning team, during all of this process, they're reaching out, they're gathering materials. We want our teachers to have a lot of resources to review when it comes time to taking a look at the adoption, at the materials. Okay. Phase 2 focuses on research and evaluating instructional materials for a possible pilot. So with all of those materials, we don't have the ability to pilot every single one. So we go through and we look for the ones that match our practices and what we want. This process takes some time, but there's multiple opportunities for teachers, administrators, and when appropriate, for students to give us feedback on those on those pilots. Finally, our team typically narrows down a selection, and in the spring, if all goes well, we take the materials through a final audit process that is called the IMET, which is basically an auditing process provided by the Oregon Department of Education. And then we recommend to the board those materials for adoption. Finally, the last phase is once those are approved from the board, we begin working on professional development and our implementation plan. So some of our next steps is just sharing kind of a little bit about the timeline. A typical adoption, it takes about 1.5 years. Phase 1 really starts in the spring, the year prior to actually reviewing the materials. So our ELA and ELD team met last spring and started standards alignment. So did our math team. And they completed the standards process. Our ELA team is just wrapping up, but our math team is complete. Tonight, the teaching and learning team is sharing where we are in this process, but we're also coming to you because we're seeking 2 board liaisons to support or up to 2 board liaisons to support our instructional materials adoption work. And that would, what we're really hoping for is that the liaisons can either serve on the committee or be a conduit of information between our instructional materials adoptions and the board itself. Keeping the board apprised of any progress that we're making, as well as, you know, what's especially important as we go through the process. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. I know I think I speak for all of us when I say that we really appreciate you considering having some input from the board. There's so much thought and reasoning that goes into how you guys get to the conclusion you get to before you show up here and present to us. But you can only present so much. And so truly, when we sit up here and hear it, there's still so many gaps for us. And it's hard to understand why we picked what we picked and why maybe something else wasn't a good enough option. And so I don't know if we really have valuable feedback on every one of those adoptions, but it's nice to be invited to be a part of the process. And yeah, we'll see how this goes, but we appreciate you guys opening that up to us.
Let me make one quick comment on that, and that is that the board liaisons don't have to be in the trenches at every meeting. You know, that can be a fairly higher level kind of check-in thing. So if you are thinking about wanting to do it, but schedule is prohibitive, we can work around that and work with you on it.
Absolutely.
When is a reasonable expectation for you guys to be notified of an interested board liaison? I feel like I'm speaking really
Oh.
slowly. I'm so tired.
Um,
I mean, when would you want to know?
well, I suppose it's when do you want to start?
Okay. Okay. That answers my
We're ready.
question. Okay,
We're moving forward.
contact you directly.
Yes, that's
Okay,
fine.
got it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have a couple of action items on the agenda that we do need to cover. Dr. Lyon, I will give you the floor. to
Okay,
present OSBA.
we have the 4 policies that are up for action that we posted last month. We pulled from adoption last month because we still had a little work to do on them. They've been up for a month to be reviewed by board members. And we have collected all of the feedback, which really hasn't been very much at all. And we are in a position where we want to recommend as an action item, adopting the 4 policies that we had kind of left over from the last round. And so let me quickly go through, quick being the operative word. Policy IB, which was freedom of expression. At the first read, we had taken out that we had included the language that said that the superintendent's decision shall be final and binding to all parties. And that was freedom of expression. The recommendation was to actually strike that and leave the provision in place that if the complainant is not satisfied with the decision of the superintendent, the complainant may appeal to the board under established district policies, which we pretty much do for everything. So we restored that one. That's 1B. 1J simply had one little change, and that was the idea that instead of using grades K-12, we actually used the other language option, and that was all grades. And that ensures that pre-K and post-12 is added as consideration for that school counseling program. So that was an easy change. The JB was a question about striking the Title IX compliance language. And the question was that wise to do? And the answer was yes, because that is fully covered in policy JBA/GBN for both students and staff, and we're covered there. So the recommendation is to pass that as presented. And then the final one is JFCF, which is the hazing, harassment, intimidation, menacing, bullying, cyberbullying, teen dating, violence, or domestic violence for students. And one of our board members suggested that we needed to expand some of the language on page 2 regarding creating a hostile environment, including interfering with the psychological well-being of a student, to include the language such as causing significant psychological harm to the student. And our recommendation is that we adopt that alternate or that added language. We checked with OSBA. They have no issues with that, and we're fine. So with those reviews in place, the recommendation is to pass those 4 policies as described.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the OSBA policies as presented?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the OSBA policy updates with the added revisions as presented.
Wonderful. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Lovely. Any room for discussion? Anybody have comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. All right, as our final action item, we need to appoint a new director to the school board to take over for Director Nyangaro. I know this job is something obviously we all take seriously. We've been through a lot this evening. And this year we were really lucky. I mean, we had a lot of really qualified applicants for this position. Narrowing it down to 5 was hard, and even within those 5, at least speaking for myself, there was several that I could easily select to join our board. So while we can only pick one this evening, I can't encourage people enough to keep this as a consideration. And when it's time to put your name on the on their election ballot, to please do so. Running is not super enjoyable, but I mean, we would love to see your faces back on this board. And there was a lot of really great people that we could benefit from. So at this time, everybody has a ballot in front of them, correct? And you can fill it out and hand it my way. I have all 5. Oh. And Miss Christine, are you looking for a tally on each person or just a total? Okay. There is a vote for Mr. Ian Swanson. There is a vote for Harmony Carson. Another vote for Harmony Carson. Another vote for Ian Swanson. And another vote for Harmony Carson. So Harmony Carson is our new appointed director by a vote of 3.
Madam Chair, since we took a vote, can we take a kind of a second affirming vote for, I think that's how we did this the last time.
Okay, how do we do that?
So what we do is, Madam Chair, I move that we finalize the appointment of Harmony Carson to fill the
Vacancy.
the vacancy of Director Nyangaro.
Thank you for making that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
None. So with a motion of 5-0, that carries. Nope, I'm still on. Okay, we are not quite finished. We have one more thing. We are going to share with you the remaining comments for tonight. They did not pertain to the agenda, but they're a public comment that we wanted to share. I have a few in person and there's a few online submissions. Am I correct? So we will get started as soon as we are ready. You ready for me to call people forward? Okay. We will begin with Rachel Duke. Thanks for joining us. You have 3 minutes.
We picked quite a night to come. Hi, my name is Rachel Duke. I'm the Executive Director at Community Partners for Affordable Housing. We are a nonprofit housing development organization, and we mostly serve Washington County. We've been, but we also serve Multnomah County. We've been here for about 30 years. Actually, next year starts our 30th year anniversary. In case you'd like to celebrate with us, we would love that. We do 4 things. We build affordable housing. We maintain that affordable housing into the future. We provide a lot of services for our residents, and we also do a lot of advocacy around affordable housing issues. I'd like to read you our mission statement. Community Partners for Affordable Housing advances equitable communities and housing justice through developing sustainable and long-lasting housing, providing our residents with services for stabilization and growth, and connecting people who are unhoused with a place to call home. So I'm really excited to let you know that we are building some housing that will be part of your district. It is called Planbeck Gardens. It's named after our founding board member, Doug Planbeck, who passed away in 2020. It's located in the Basalt Creek area. And it's on Southwest Boones Ferry Road. It's in Tualatin, but it's also in your district. I'm very confused by the boundaries. There'll be 116 apartments there. And we're going to have 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. And there's going to be a lot of kids. There's going to be a lot of kids in that building. We work closely with partners at all of our buildings. So at this property, for example, we'll be working with Centro Cultural. We'll be working with Community Action and LifeWorks. We also work with the schools that feed into our buildings. That's really important to us. We sometimes work with them by having kindergarten roundup at our communities. We provide resources for our kids, the supplies that they need to go. And sometimes we meet with school staff to talk about, after signing all the appropriate releases of information, to talk about what's going on the property, so that we can work together to support our families. We have a lot of programming for kids. We have after-school programming to support education. We have summer camps, and we do stuff for toddlers and teens. We look forward. We'd really be happy to come back to a future, less stressful meeting and talk to you more about this project. And we also are really looking forward to being part of the school district and to working with you. And I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues here who have a few short comments to make as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it. All right, we will follow with an electronic comment. Electronic submission.
Stacy Robertson of Sherwood. I recently submitted a records request to see if we had specific controversial books in our school libraries. Many of us have heard about these particular books on social media or from other concerned parents in surrounding school districts. Age inappropriate books with explicit sexual content such as genderqueer and lawn boy, or the degrading racial messaging of Stamped for Kids, to name a few, are being used in classrooms across the country. While I was pleased to see that the books on my records request list were not in our Sherwood libraries, it doesn't mean that these books aren't being offered through individual teacher classroom collections, book clubs, or being read aloud to students. Sherwood parents and residents shouldn't have to submit records requests to know what books are being offered within our district. This should be made public, especially today when common sense has been abandoned by many school districts. Our district should provide this information on the district's website, which would be easily accessible to everyone. This information should include all books that reside in all of our libraries, classroom collections, book clubs, and books that are being read aloud to students. It should be kept current as book offerings change. A simple book title, author, and classroom location would suffice. Please commit to making this a priority for Sherwood schools. In today's hyper-political environment, it is more important than ever to build trust and transparency with Sherwood parents and residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Daly, you may take the podium. Is that the wrong order for you guys? Sorry, I was given the order. You can switch it up if you'd like to.
Good evening, Board of Directors. My name is Melissa Daly. I'm a Housing Program Coordinator for Washington County in the Housing Services Department. I'm here to ask your support in adopting a nonprofit affordable housing property tax waiver for Planbeck Gardens and the city of Tualatin. As you already heard, this property is on the far eastern edge of the Sherwood School District and yet in the city of Tualatin. Now, I'm sensitive to your budget issues that you were talking about earlier this evening. But one thing that I want to assure you of is that you would not lose funding based on a property tax that is being waived. So let me repeat that. If you were to adopt a property tax waiver for this Planbeck Gardens, you would not lose funding. Schools receive funding via a formula that is based on the number of students enrolled, and any funding not provided by local property taxes is supplied by the state. Another concern can be that the district's payments of their bonds and that waiving taxes on one property will therefore increase the tax burden of other property owners within the city of Sherwood. While technically true, the increase in property tax owed, if the taxes were waived for the property, it would amount to so little as to be unnoticed by the property owners due to the large tax base here of approximately $4 billion with an increase being in the range of around 25 cents per year per property owner. Multiple school districts within Washington County have already adopted this program and partnered with their local jurisdictions, including the school districts in Forest Grove, Cornelius, Hillsborough, Beaverton, and Tigard-Tualatin. The program is especially attractive to cities and counties because it provides crucial support for housing project operations, yet is a minimal impact to the taxes that are collected for these jurisdictions. The Sherwood School District support of the nonprofit affordable housing tax waiver will help the nonprofit owner, Community Partners for Affordable Housing, provide services and other things that will help set up families for success. The state of Oregon and Washington County are in an affordable housing crisis. We are asking you to please lend your support to the 116 units at Planbeck Gardens and be a partner with Washington County, Metro, Oregon Housing and Community Services, the City of Tualatin, and Community Partners for Affordable Housing. We'd like to ask you to adopt a resolution approving the nonprofit affordable
That's
housing
time.
affordable waiver. Thanks.
Thank you. Yep, back to you.
Courtney Constantine, Sherwood. I am submitting comment as a concerned Sherwood parent with children at the middle school and high school level. We have resided in Sherwood for 8 years, specifically moving here for the incredible education opportunity our children could have. Our oldest child is a senior in SHS and has worked extremely hard the last 3 years to earn the grades he needs to achieve his college education goals. It is with those goals and hard work in mind that I am submitting comment to you today. When I heard about the new standards-based grading system coming out, it seemed simple and straightforward. However, we are finding that to be the complete opposite. As all 3 of my children went to Hopkins and Hawksview, I'm not new to standards-based grading. During those years, getting report cards that were based on year-long standards was always a confusing situation. It was almost impossible to really know where your children were in relation to where they needed to be at that time. I do not fault teachers in this at all, as they did the very best with the system that had been adopted. At an elementary level, this confusing grading system wasn't as much of a concern as GPA didn't come into play at that time. However, now that we have a senior who is working hard with AP and college level courses to earn the GPA needed, he's finding himself struggling to comprehend and meet the requirements of standards-based grading. First and foremost, adopting this system, even as a test, is making children feel discouraged, unable to succeed, as well as feeling as if during their most formative year, they have been labeled as a guinea pig. I do not believe the Sherwood School District that we moved here for wants the children to feel as low as they are right now. Standards-based grading, right or wrong, is not recognized or adopted by higher education, putting seniors working to apply for admissions at a disadvantage. With the way the trimester system is set up at SHS, students have less actual time to earn the grades they need to present their results. With SBG, current seniors, as they apply for colleges, will likely have lower GPAs substantially. High school should be preparing them for the continued education they are wishing to attend, and SBG does not do that. The class in which my senior has SBG, the teacher has already expressed that the rubric is likely the issue, leading me to the question of if the teachers have had the adequate training on this new system to accurately report on our children. And if this rubric is the issue, it should be corrected immediately, instead of using the children as guinea pigs to force a system to work that isn't so far. The example of that for my student is a quiz where he completed everything correctly, got the correct answer, but because the diagram he drew wasn't what the teacher wanted, according to the rubric, my student received a 0. In real world grading, that would have put him at a B or at worst a C, not an F. Changing a grading system from what students have known for over 6 years when they are just getting ready to jump off and start their lives is the wrong choice. Seniors should never be the beta testers for something new. As a parent, I'm requesting that the Sherwood School Board reevaluate standards-based grading. It's time.
Thank you. Jillian Felter. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having us Chair Hawkins and Dr. Lyon and the rest of the directors. We really appreciate your time on what has been a long, and I know really one of the most lit school board meetings that I've ever been to. So thank you for having us tonight. And again, I just want to reiterate, we would love to come back. My name is Jillian Suraj Felton. I'm the Housing Director at Community Partners for Affordable Housing. Regulated affordable housing is an important and integral part of every community. Studies show communities thrive when people can live near where they work. And regulated affordable housing ensures that opportunity is available for everyone in your community, from the person at the checkout counter at your grocery store, or the dental hygienist you see twice a year, or perhaps even a new school teacher who wants to live in the community that they work. Community Partners for Affordable Housing is developing 116 units of regulated affordable housing on Boones Ferry in Tualatin. Construction is scheduled to begin in spring of next year. The property is over 4.5 acres, and over half the units will have 2 or more bedrooms. Based on other projects in our portfolio, we expect that there will be over 100 kids and likely close to 200 school-age kids living at Planbeck Gardens by 2025. The project will include on-site services for families, play areas, and will be on the new Tualatin Park Trail system. Rents will be between 30% and 60% of area median income. And for the occupations that I mentioned earlier, they all fall in that range. Affordable housing is developed through a combination of local, regional, state, and federal resources, as well as significant private investment from banks and investors, bringing jobs and revenues to the communities in which we build. One of the local resources affordable housing relies upon is a waiver of property taxes for the duration of the affordability period, which is required by the state to be 60 years. Many school districts participate in this waiver as communities recognize the marked improvements students make when they are secure in their housing as a benefit to the community and to the district as a whole. Property tax abatement for this project represents about $2 million in the construction budget by increasing the borrowing capabilities. So, right, the decrease expenses, we're able to borrow more money, and that translates in the current interest rate environment to about $2 million. The city of Tualatin recently passed an ordinance for property tax abatement for affordable housing projects. In the state of Oregon, a full property tax exemption is granted if 51% of the property taxes are waived. This means that we need your help. Currently, the city of Tualatin, Washington County, and Metro all provide property tax abatements for nonprofit affordable housing providers. We would ask the Sherwood School District do the same, encouraging affordable housing development in your community now and in the future. Thank you.
All right, we're ready for you.
Alicia and Aaron Brown of Sherwood. We have 2 children in the Sherwood School District at the high school, 9th and 11th grade, and we have serious concerns about the standards-based grading pilot program. We have noticed this school year that it has been nearly impossible for either of our kids to attain a 4 on any quiz or exam in the areas of math, Spanish, and Lit Comp, which would be the equivalent of an A. In fact, one teacher said that you have to be beyond perfect to achieve this. What has happened to an A being 90 to 100%? Simply a 3B or a 4A is ridiculous. I am especially concerned for my junior daughter. She started the year with a 3.94 GPA and is consumed with planning for college and scholarships. This grading system will put her at a huge disadvantage, as well as our finances when she doesn't qualify for merit-based grants. I should add that they are both working extremely hard for their grades and typically have all A's with an occasional B. This grading system should not be penalizing these kids while trying to bring up those who are barely passing. The two should coexist if you are truly trying to be equitable. Please reconsider implementing the SBG system.
Thank you. Karen Stoddard, you're up next.
Good evening, Superintendent Lyon and Board of Directors. I edited my statement here just a little bit to add what I've heard tonight. So I'll start with that. I'm sorry to hear about the budget problems that the district is now dealing with. I appreciate the honest information that you've given tonight. As a parent, I hope that the district and the board, a large part of this problem stems from changed and woken up. absolutely a huge contributing factor. You have voted with money, and you are finally seeing the results. I hope that you will consider what I have to say, and that if you listen to parents, enrollment will go up. Suggestion is please to raise our taxes. We are all having to tighten our belts, and the district will have to too. At this point, you've had several concerns from several parents over the last year about concerns surrounding books. Books that are either required by the class or provided by the school district for choice reading. Books that are highly inappropriate for an educational setting due to graphic sexual content, drug use, violence, ideological agenda pushing, and worst of all, contain scenes that are very likely to be extremely triggering to the students. Coming up in just a couple of weeks, ninth graders will be required to choose a book from a required list for a project in their English Lit class called Book Club. This assignment is required. For the parents listening, this list is available via Canvas or from your child's teacher. Most every single book contains either vulgar language, extreme violence in a multitude of ways, sex scenes, sexual fantasies, incest, rape, violence against police, violence against each other, and in some, suicide. For context, here are some direct excerpts from Common Sense Media. The novel includes of extreme cruelty, rape, murder, beatings, and a suicide attempt. There are graphic episodes of violence as characters are beaten, a man is shot, and teen boys drug girls and then assault them. This book has often been banned for its mature content. It contains scenes like a woman is run over by a drunk driver, people are burned alive in a camper, a man is shot in the face by accident by his friend, and there's talk of his friend hanging himself in jail afterwards. The main character enjoys masturbation and looking at magazines with nude pictures. He describes how he gets an erection while hugging a school counselor. These books are not only inappropriate for so many reasons, but they are extremely depressing and clearly push an agenda. When teenage and suicide rates are climbing, how can a school in good faith justify presenting this material as good and educational? There are so many books that can be chosen from that are educational, positive, inspirational, and give kids hope. At the listening session, we were told that they're age appropriate, honest, and give real life examples. My daughter brought home a book today with a chapter that called Sexy, where a girl chooses to have an extramarital affair. She's treated like crap. He never learns, and she has low self-esteem. That is not what I want my daughter to think about men. That is not
That's
how I
time.
want them to behave. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just want to, I think we had some rules about applause and making noise during public comment. It might be useful to remind the audience of that.
If we can during public comment, just remain quiet so that we can listen to what's being said, that we can just take it in. We understand there's a lot of emotion and concern behind it. We do totally understand that. We see lots of this, we hear lots of this, but we do want to be able to hear your comments without the distractions of the rest of the room. So if you can, please just be quiet while you're in here and let us listen to the comments that are being shared. I think we have one more online comment. Is that true? Okay, thank you.
Erin and Kara Gladstone, Sherwood. We have 3 children in the Sherwood School District, 5th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade, and are very concerned about the move towards standards-based grading at the high school level. Our primary concern is that it is significantly more difficult to achieve an A in classes using standards-based grading, which puts Sherwood students who are trying to get into college and get scholarships at a disadvantage. Our freshman and junior currently have 5 classes between them piloting standards-based grading, and our junior had several pilot classes last year as well. As a result, our students have had multiple experiences with both grading models. Classes piloting standards-based grading in different subject matters and with different teachers consistently require performance well above grade level to achieve an A. This is in contrast to classes using a traditional grading model. These classes allow for more flexibility between an A and a B. Students are certainly expected to work hard and do well to earn an A in classes utilizing the traditional system, but there is not a need to be significantly above grade level in a particular subject to have an opportunity to earn a grade in the 90 to 95% range. To be clear, it is the grading model, not the individual teachers, that we have concerns with. This move to standards-based grading is negatively impacting students' GPAs and options for their futures. As our students come out of the years impacted by COVID and online classes, and the expectation that they achieve well beyond grade level expectations to earn an A seems even more harsh and unrealistic. So many of the students have worked hard to simply catch up to where they should be after nearly 1.5 years of altered education. Making a grading system change at this point and testing it out on our students, particularly when other high schools and colleges throughout the nation are not all adopting this grading system, is unreasonable. An additional piece of standards-based grading that our students have found particularly frustrating is the inability to monitor throughout the trimester how they are actually doing in a class. In classes using a traditional grading model, it is very clear how students are doing and what percentage of their grade each assignment or assessment is worth. In classes piloting standards-based grading, our students have had very little sense of where they stand throughout the trimester. This is ironic since standards-based grading is supposed to give students more clarity about how they are doing. However, in our experience, standards-based grading at the high school level has actually had the opposite effect. If the Sherwood School District is looking for a way to reduce the number of Ds and Fs at the high school, we would implore the district to find an alternative that does not simultaneously penalize students trying to earn As. Please reconsider this move towards standards-based grading at Sherwood High School.
Thank you. We have one final in-person comment, Dan McKenzie.
All right, best for last, right? All right. First of all, just want to thank Duncan for your service on the board, especially for your comments tonight. That's probably the most fiery I've seen anyone speak on the board in quite some time. I particularly appreciated the story that you shared about your father and his success. That story is great. And when we think about these kids' educations, they're writing their own stories, right? And in any great story, what do you have? You have a villain, you have a victor, and you have a victim. I think we would all agree that we don't want our kids to be villains, right? We don't want them to be bad guys, or else they're gonna have to meet this guy over here. We don't want them to be victims either, right? We all want our kids to be victors. The book list that the lady up here, I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name, alluded to earlier, as I'm scanning through that, what I'm seeing a lot of is a lot of just perpetuation of victim mentality across the board, right? Not the other subjects notwithstanding, the over sexualization of our children, it's disgusting. You know, the violence, the language, it's just beyond reproach. I don't understand how this is considered educational. You know, if we want our kids to become victorious, we need to start teaching them and having them read books about people who are victorious, right? If we don't want our kids to become victims, let's teach them or have them read books by, I don't know, the Stoics, right? Epictetus said, I'm going to have to look it up because I'm getting cranked up here now. I can't remember. And of course, I don't have it anywhere near here. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. So if, for instance, my own story, it's a story of a drug addicted parent, another abusive parent, poverty, you name it. I could have taken that and become a victim. In fact, a lot of people who knew me over the years expected that to be my story. Thankfully, I had teachers when I was younger who pointed me in the direction of folks like Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, people who, in spite great challenges, right? They lived in times that were much harder than our own. We're extremely spoiled and lazy. And I think the result we're seeing now, we have just nothing to complain about. So we make things up or you know, create more victimhood than we actually have. I chose a different path. And literally that was it. I just made a choice. Right? Nobody came and helped me. Nobody gave me $1 million. If anybody wants to, that's cool. But guys, come on, like we can do better than this.
That's time.
Thank you. We don't have any remaining electronic submissions. Okay. All right, it has been a very long night, a very long evening. We are going to adjourn tonight's meeting. Our next meeting of the board will be held on November 9th, 2022. This meeting is adjourned.